Welcome everyone to Sunday Sentiments.
Of course, this is a hate crime.
And if she's found guilty, then she has to face the consequences.
They normally end up killing some particular kinds of people.
It's a violation of human rights.
That's a very traumatic event.
So I just wanted to ask the panel about their own opinions on this topic.
Hi everyone and welcome to Sunday Sentiments. We meet every 2 Sundays in the month to discuss issues that are important to us and current events. Today we have 2 topics, which is intersex and transgender persons participating in sports. So we're going to discuss that because of the Olympics and some issues that have come around because of that. And then we'll also talk about the football's link to domestic abuse, racism, and toxic masculinity in light of Euro 2020. I would just like to ask panelists to remember that this session is recorded. So if you don't want to be in the recording, you can leave the meeting, or if you just want your audio there, let us know and we'll blow out your video. Everyone's opinion is valid. We need to respect each other's opinions. We don't have to have the same opinion. And we're also here to learn. So some of these topics, they're developing and we're all learning. So yeah, let's just be open and listen to one another. So we're going to start with the topic around intersex and transgender people joining the Olympics. And I'd like to say, first of all, I'll give a definition of intersex. This is those that have differences in sex development, people who are born with sex characteristics that do not fit the typical binary notions of male or female bodies. That is the definition by Human Rights of the United Nations. Transgender person is a person whose gender identity is different from the sex or gender they were thought to be at birth. So sex is male or female, those are biological, and gender is seen to be a social construct which denotes masculine or feminine characteristics. So this debate has really struck people's nerves because of the Olympics. So for the first time, we had 2 transgender women participating in the Olympics. And the reason why this is so historic is because in 125 years in modern history, there has never been trans person competing in the Olympics. So on the other hand, so we have on one hand the 2 trans women that were allowed to compete. Then on the other hand, we had intersex persons disallowed from competing. So for example, Caster Semenya and 2 Namibian girls who were thought to have high levels of testosterone, so were not allowed to compete. So this has brought about debate about the intersection between race and gender in sport. So what I'd like to hear from you is, what do you think of these developments? Because on one hand, some people see that trans women and intersex persons who compete with higher levels of testosterone is unfair and cheating, and others feel that intersex and transgender athletes who are forced to take hormone blockers is discriminatory against women and oppresses intersex and trans women. So men competing each other do not have testosterone level checks, so they're never checked to see if the testosterone matches to stop unfair advantage. And trans men do not have any conditions or limitations in participating in games. So I just want you to think about that, and let's discuss what you think of this situation, and I'll take any comments. Yes, Shiro.
Personally, I think they do have an unfair advantage, both the intersex and the trans women. They do have an unfair advantage over the other female athletes. So I would not want to be against anyone changing their gender. And as for trans, it's not their fault, like that they were born that way. Like let's say Kasa Semenya. There's also a Kenyan called Margaret Wambui also. She won't be competing in the Olympics. It's not their fault. But what I think is that there should be another category for such athletes to compete in, so that they can compete against themselves, because it's not fair for the other women to compete against them, since they do have an advantage. So why not have another category?
Thank you, Shiro, for your viewpoint. You're saying you think there should be a third category for trans people and intersex persons to compete. I would just like to point out that people going through transitioning from gender do have hormone suppression, and within 4 to 5 months, their hormones, the testosterone is kind of lessened. So just to bear that in mind, and that there's no scientific evidence to say that their levels are exceptionally higher than women. But you have a good point. You said a third category. So thanks, Shiro, for your viewpoint. Is there anyone else who wants to add? Yes, Keshi?
Yeah, I wanted to say that even if there is no scientific evidence to show that, I don't know what you just said, I don't know, levels contribute to anything, that still this, let's say, male to female transgender athletes, in my opinion, they do have an unfair advantage, because even if they have transitioned to being women, they still have the form and the muscles of a man. So they have an unfair advantage, because in sport, power and endurance comes from the how do you say, the build of the person, the muscles of the person. And we know that a man's muscles are not the same as a woman. A man's body is not the same. So whether they are taking, they are reducing their testosterone levels or not, in my opinion, their build is still an advantage, which will give them an unfair advantage. And many of these people have been competing in male sports and now move over to female sport. How isn't that an advantage that they were already in the male category? But that's just my opinion. I'm sure many people will think otherwise, but that's what I think, that they do have an unfair advantage. And I'm not talking about intersex, because they are two different. You've told us they're different. There are some who are born with both, and there are those who transition from one gender to another. So me, I'm talking about male to female transgender athletes have an unfair advantage. But regarding the others, the intersex one, I was thinking if their testosterone levels are brought back down to what is acceptable, I don't see why they shouldn't compete with other women, because if they've been living as women and their bodies don't actually, I don't know anyway. I've given my opinion. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Keshi, for your viewpoint. There's a US tennis legend called Martina Navratilova who shares your viewpoint. She said there needs to be more research around this, because she said she feels that there are competitive advantages for trans women. And, you know, she says it's not fair to pit trans women against what is seen as, well, I don't even know what to say. Well, women born as women. I mean, you know, you have to also use the right term. So yes.
Yeah, also I wanted to say, like you said, the female to male athletes of women who are born women and then become male, they're allowed to, there are no restrictions for them to compete in male sports. The reason why, because they know that women cannot, that's a fact of biology. A woman and a man's performance is different. Even when you look at 100 meters race, how fast a man will run, it's women, they don't run with men because they don't have the same power and endurance. So that's why women who become men are allowed, because they know they cannot surpass men. We know that men have a competitive advantage. That's my opinion.
Okay, but don't you think that that in itself brings out a discriminatory practice where women who transition to men, are they then given, top up testosterone or, maximum levels of testosterone to make it a fair play? Do you know what I mean? So on one hand, women are told they need to suppress their testosterone, but the women who transition to men, there's no conditions, they're not given like special testosterone to make them equal to men. Like I don't know. This is
Because
I'm not an
world.
expert. Sorry.
It's a man's world, that's why.
All right, thank you, Keshi, for your point. Does anyone else have something to add? Do you think that Caster Semenya should be forced, and all the girls who were stopped from competing should be forced to take testosterone blockers to compete in the Olympics? Is it fair for women? And doesn't this take us back to, the 19 whatever hundreds, where they used to do pick and poke tests to see who's a woman poking at you, looking at you? It's very humiliating and damaging. We'll go with Kiriko, Shakira, and then Margaret, please.
Well, I personally believe that the South African person should actually not run with the women, because she has testosterone, and that gives her an advantage over the women. So yeah, and I agree they should check her. It sounds so bad, and I agree, but it is not fair. For me, I've always thought, put yourself in also the women's shoes. How would you feel running with somebody who is really actually physically and inside her body is really a man, except that it's actually confusing, but it's still not fair for the people who are born women as women to compete with the South African who is like half-half. She has the advantage of having the extra she needs. Even when you look at her muscle and everything, it's actually manly. So it's not fair for the women that she's allowed to run with them. They should have their own category. That's just how I feel. It might be offensive to some, but I stand by my opinion.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Kirigo, for your viewpoint. So it seems that there's this view that it's very unfair if someone has higher levels of testosterone. And I'll just point out here what testosterone does. So testosterone is a hormone that increases muscle mass, strength, hemoglobin, and affects endurance. Okay, so a lot of women are feeling, okay, so if the levels of testosterone are higher, it means that you'll get more muscle mass and your endurance is increased. And therefore, yes, maybe there should be some suppression or blockers. But Caster Semenya, for example, says that, there are people who are born with natural ability in sports. When you just use testosterone as a marker, you're saying that just because she might have higher levels, that she has no natural ability at sports and is not naturally good at whatever she's doing. So just using that one marker might not be enough. Just to think about that as well. So we'll have, who was next? It was Maggie. No, sorry, Shakira and then Maggie. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's just that I know that we're always, and a lot of the time our topics end up talking about race, but I feel like a lot of these are also like racist in like background of the accusations that they have, because a lot of the women who get tested because they're like, no, you're way too good to be naturally whatever. It's a lot of them are African American women who are they're just talented. They did the same thing with Sha'Carri Richardson. And people were putting out tweets saying that she had long nails because she was doing I forgot what those shots are called that people use in weightlifting and stuff like that, but that she was using steroids, and that's why her nails were so long. And it was the same with Flojo back in the day, that she had long nails, and that means that she was taking steroids as well. I feel like a lot of these like bars that they put on stuff is just because they don't like African Americans actually being like, they can't accept that they're not good at stuff. They did this thing with Sha'Carri Richardson. They're doing it with the swim caps that you're not allowed to wear that are specifically made for Afros, because they're like, hair doesn't do that. And they're always putting on restrictions for just African American women. Like, why should the Namibian women have restrictions because of their own like natural amount of testosterone that they have in their body? Also, just because you said it before, it's assigned female at birth. Some people like using that, and all of us in this panel are cis women, as in we were born women.
Thank you for giving me the correct term. And thanks for your point. I have to say, I did also give a little of a side eye because I was thinking, well, it's interesting that the people who've been pulled out and banned, the intersex persons, happen to be Black women, Black or brown, because historically the other people who have been banned have been, there was an Indian woman, and there's this Namibian girl, this Caster Semenya. So that was interesting. And then you look at the two who are allowed to compete, the trans women happen to be white. So we need, we also look at that and wonder, okay, what's going on here? And Shakira has brought up some points there that a lot of the time the athletes that are tested for steroids or testosterone happen to be Black women or Black men, because it's like, how can you be so exemplary? There must be something. Let's look for something. So that's a very good point. We're here to hear different opinions, and that is also something to consider. Why is it that there's a lot of investigation and all that when it comes to Black and brown athletes? Thanks, Shakira. Who was next?
Maggie.
Yes, Maggie.
Okay, I agree with everybody else. I think there should be another category that they should participate in, just to be fair. But it's also unfair if it is being done according to racist, because if it is Black or brown, then the law is different, and if it is white, the law is different. And it is not the first time. Even a Kenyan in 1988, I think she was pulled out because of the same reason, that she developed some strength that others didn't have. Her name was Francisca Chepkirui, and she was pulled out in the race. So I think there's so much on Africans than there in the white people. But still, I think they should, since it has been out there, it's loud because of Semenya. So I think they should also create another category for those transgenders to participate in.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes, it's something to consider. There might be other issues that come from that, having a third category. I don't think it's just straightforward and black and white, but maybe something to consider. I don't know. It really does seem to be unfair if someone's testosterone levels are higher. But I also don't agree with this poking and word and picking at Black and brown women because they're exceptional, to try and find something to stop them from competing. Then there should be some other solution. I just don't know what, but let's keep discussing. We will have Marie Claire, Shakira, and then Shamsa, please.
I definitely agree with what most of you have said. I think this is a very difficult, but I also say sensitive because I don't really have much of research on it. But based on what everyone said, you wouldn't put a female and a male together to compete. You know, so to me, I think it's unfair for a transgender to compete with normal female in a, you know, in the Olympics. But I then agree with what Shiro said, because it should be another type of Olympics for only transgender, because if, you know, racing is based on a physiological advantage, you know, female don't have the same body or the same mass as men. So I really agree with, you know, having them racing together. But also, if you think about inclusivity, I think it's the right thing that Olympics are trying to do. You know, we always, so in so many ways, inclusivity have been, you know, taught about, but just it's a very, I'm finding this really wanted to kind of discuss. So I'm learning, as Chico said at the beginning, but also I don't want to hurt anyone, because I think all of us are going to have a different opinion. But what makes me sad from what you said as well is about this no attacking Black or brown women. So should we just probably Olympics, should we just actually try to resolve that racism, you know, rather than actually then trying to resolve a transgender and whoever wants to race? I really am finding this topic a little bit hard. I really do.
Yeah, I agree with you, Marie-Claire. It's a very difficult and sensitive topic. And I think also, as the tennis legend Martina Navratilova says, there needs to be more research. It's as if these regulatory bodies don't want to, you know, bring up the scientific-based research. You know, so people are just taking a stab in the dark and we don't even know what's happening, because there is information that when you start taking hormone therapy, the testosterone is blocked, you know. So can things be demystified? We need to know really, is the testosterone blocked so that that advantage is removed? But then Keshi also brought up a good point about the people who still have the muscle and the physical body of a man that might give them an advantage. There's so many things. I don't think this is just a black and white issue. That's why there needs to be more discussion about it, more research, and also science-based evidence. Because right now, as Shiro said, it must feel so unfair for some of the women competing if they feel that they're not on a level playing field. So next we had, was it Shamsa and then Shakira, please. Shamsa, Shakira, let's give Shamsa a chance because you had said something, and then we'll come to you, please.
Thank you. I just want to say a few things. That it's not a matter of black or white. It's just, you know, a separate category. I'm totally agree with the Mary Claire. You know, the body of transgender is totally different from the women. So there should be another category for them. They should not play with the women because it's totally unfair with them. So this is my point of view.
Thank you, Shamsa. So a lot of the women here feel that there should be a third category, maybe people whose testosterone levels are a bit higher than, you know, than normal to compete in those categories. I don't know what that would mean. I don't know if that would create another can of worms. But yeah, it seems like a lot of people feel we want inclusivity. We don't want anyone excluded from the sports. We don't want people excluded from showing their skill, but maybe there should be a third category. That's what I'm hearing. I would also like to just point out something, because we're trying also to be balanced, is that advantages in sports are there all the time. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's unfair. There's some people who are left-handed, basketball players. Others are right-handed. Does that mean that, this is unfair because, some have just think about those kind of things. That advantage doesn't necessarily mean unfairness. Let's just be a bit more open-minded, because there are people who are naturally skilled at what they're doing, and to just use one thing as a marker might be unfair. Yes, let's hear Shakira.
Actually, it was also I had something else also this how you're saying that some people have like just natural, like their bodies are just built perfectly for specific sports, right? Specifically Michael Phelps, who gets praised in the media because he has a very large wingspan, so that makes swimming for him like much easier than all of his competitors, because he has like such large reach, so he just swims faster because of his natural body. But nobody ever says anything, oh, but that's an unfair advantage, like the Namibian women who just have high testosterone. They just say, oh, but that's great. He's just lucky that he has a big wingspan.
Thank you,
and
Shakira.
also,
yeah, okay. No, I'm agreeing with you. That's the point I made before, that, having an advantage doesn't necessarily equate with unfairness. It could be someone's just naturally, talented. Yes, what's the further point? Yes, Shakira, you wanted to say something more, or is she frozen?
Oh, I'm here again. It's back. No, it's just, it reminded me of two other instances as well. For example, people were asking, like, is there any point where they said that women who transition to men, like trans men, weren't allowed to compete with men? And that actually did happen like a few years ago. It wasn't Olympics, but it was this high schooler who was wrestling. And because he was beating everybody else, they were like, no, this is unfair. He was born female, he can't compete with us because he was beating them. So they were just getting upset that this person that they were, because they were probably transphobic, were like, this woman in her head beat me, so that's not fair. So this person's not allowed to compete. That's what they try to do there. And again, with the race thing, another runner, she was actually a hurdle runner, Brianna McNeil, who was banned, and they're still keeping the ban, even though learning what actually happened, because she missed an at-home drug test because she had gotten an abortion 2 days before they were going to test her. So she didn't hear them coming to her house. So she missed it. And then they ended up banning her, saying that she was doping. Without actually doing any kind of test, they just assumed that she was lying. So they just said in the media everywhere, just completely ruining her reputation as a runner and a hurdle runner, saying that she was doing all kinds of injections and stuff to help her performance, even though she just had an abortion 2 days before the test.
Thank you, Shakira. You sidetracked a bit with that, but yeah, so thanks for your point. I know you're trying to say that that there seems to be like sexual discrimination, so women are looked at more, and then also maybe a racial one as well. So that's something also to consider and ponder about, if there's something to do with the masculinity, and there have been issues when it comes to women, whether they're trans women or the trans men or the intersex women, and also the race angle. So Marie Claire made a very good point here. She says, how many people have said that Serena Williams looks and is built like a man? Would you say that she has an advantage when she plays with other females who don't have the same body as her? So ask yourself that question. That's very interesting. Some people have tried to also find, try and find some reason why she's so good at what she's doing. Someone else brought up an article, a scientific article that says that high testosterone and other male physiology provides a performance advantage in sport, suggesting that trans women retain some of that advantage even though they go through hormone therapy. And that's why we're saying, can we have, this thing really needs to be considered without this fear of people are being transphobic when they discuss it, because we're not saying that there shouldn't be inclusivity. We actually 100% there should be inclusivity, but maybe these concerns that women have should be taken seriously. Is there anyone who wants to make a last point, or shall we move on?
Just say.
Yeah, just say. Let's hear from you. Just say.
I'm not really going to put a big comment to what you already said, because this is a very complicated topic, and that's why I didn't really want to react, because it's so unfair, yeah, like you said, to mix different type of body, more especially that, yeah, like you said, women and men, we don't have the same ability of doing things. Sometimes we have to remember that we've got not only we've got a lot in our bodies. We've got breast, which is going to not to let us really run harder. We've got so many other things which cannot allow us to run as men are running. So it is very complicated. I think, like the way they said, they have to bring up another category of only transgenders, to have their own competitions.
Thank you, Jose, for your input. I just feel that there's this feeling with the women, because women, of course, we want to be inclusive, but we also want this thing to be discussed and considered more than it is, instead of just it being dismissed as people being uninclusive or transphobic. It's just someone else has put another okay, I don't see, it's not a scientific thing, but I will just read it. It says, higher testosterone levels after birth mean that males have larger hearts and lungs on average. Females have a wider pelvis, altering hip rotation and making them slower. So what Jose was saying, males have longer and stronger bones from puberty. The bones allow for increased reach and a wider articular surface, allowing them to put down more skeletal muscle and muscle memory. So there's advantages there that you just think, just because someone has blocked the testosterone, there are all these other side things that they've had from birth which won't disappear. So yeah. Yes, Keshi, last point, and then we need to move on, please.
I just wanted to mention that what you just read was actually part of a letter that was sent by a group of women. It's a group called Fair Play for Women, a private letter sent to the executive board of the International Olympic Committee, asking them to suspend the IOC's transgender guidelines pending further scientific study and analysis. And that they gave those what you have just read. And this group was made up of 60 British Olympic medalists, world-class sports men and women. So even they know that there should be more time and study given to this before you start opening up, especially women's sport, to people who may have an advantage over them.
Thank you again, Keshi. Again, that just shows what we're saying. We're not, women are not saying we don't want to be inclusive. We're just saying there needs to be further investigation. And that's what I've seen from a number of women or female athletes, just saying, can there be more investigation? There hasn't been enough. And one thing before we go, is, and this ties in actually to the next topic, is the matter of sports law. So sports law, law and sports it's a very interesting subject, because it seems like sports, because it's so dominant and a moneymaker and good for the economy, they seem to have a lot of autonomy and are not regulated by law. they're sort of allowed to self-regulate. And maybe that's part of the issue. These people are going around self-regulating, doing their own thing, and governments and states are not involved, whether it comes to human rights of intersex participants or the human rights of female athletes. There's no regulation, and that is the issue, that sports authorities can do whatever they like, and governments actually are scared of touching, and the legal system is scared of being involved because apparently they are allowed to have their own regulatory bodies and autonomy. Thank you very much for joining this discussion. Our next discussion will be on Euro 2020 and football's link to domestic abuse, racism, and toxic masculinity. So we're gonna move on, and yeah, please join us.